Hi everyone, this is your friend Dr. Obi. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and it's my pleasure to have you here. So, the Comfort versus Ibom Air saga continues to unfold. As a matter of fact, currently it is dominating national discourse in Nigeria. Several videos have emerged, even from the earlier videos, presenting different dimensions of what indeed happened in that flight.
Stand by, there's a situation here. Stand by. Communicate your message.
My phone, my head. Come back here. My phone and my head.
Bless you.
My goal in today's video is to walk us through a sort of legal analysis of the critical issues. Opponents have come up on the two sides, those who are for Ibom Air and those who are for the lady in question, Comfort Emmanson. And so there's been a plethora of arguments as to whether the airline has a right to forcibly drag her out of the aircraft in the manner in which they did, whether the airline had the powers to detain her in the first place in the airline, whether the requirement to switch off her phone is indeed important and necessary for in-flight and for when the plane is touching down. Many have criticized the way and manner in which private part was, of course, exposed in the course of extracting and evacuating her from inside the aircraft. So the goal of today's video is to unpack all of these issues and present what the law says, Nigerian law particularly speaking. However, it is important to first establish what the key facts are. So what are the facts? Which of course I imagine that a lot of people are familiar with, but for the purpose of this video, it is important to quickly recall the facts. So Sunday, 10th of August 2025, in a flight from Uyo to Lagos, Ms. Comfort Emmanson was on Ibom Air flight, and as the plane was about to take off, which is usual, she was instructed alongside other passengers to switch off her phone, as not doing so would interfere with the network of the aircraft and could be inimical to the flight. According to the airline's report, the press release released by the airline management, Ibom Air, they claimed that she refused to switch off her phone, after which a fellow passenger took the phone from her, switched off the phone, and gave it back to her. Of course, that led to an altercation between herself and the passenger in question. However, that was quickly resolved, and of course, flight commenced, and they, arrived in Lagos. According to the airline's press statement, as soon as they arrived in Lagos and after the other passengers had disembarked from the plane, Ms. Comfort approached the flight attendant that had earlier back in Uyo asked her to switch off her phone and assaulted the flight attendant. According to the airline's account, she hit the flight attendant, removed her wig, slapped her with her shoes, and even went as far as trying to remove the plane's fire extinguisher to hit the flight attendant. And the process, the pilot asked that she be detained in the plane after they had alerted airport security. And while airport security was being awaited, she continued to assault the flight attendant, and eventually when security arrived, they evacuated her from the airplane. In the course of evacuating her from the airplane, her blouse, was pulled off, revealing her bosom, which of course was an indecent thing to have happened. And after she was brought down to the tarmac, she continued to assault other security operatives that were there, and even in the bus, that still continued, at least from the different videos that have emerged, from different parties. Miss Comfort herself has also released a video of herself asking the flight attendant to give way and let her leave the plane, which of course could be seen from the video that the flight attendant deliberately blocked her from leaving the plane, of course with the mind that that was being done to restrain her pending when airport security would arrive to take her into custody. So I haven't given the background to the issue. It is right to then delve into what the key legal issues are. Of course, in this video, we'll try and establish the legal issues as it pertains to the rights and the powers of the airline, and also as it pertains to the rights of Miss Comfort. So, starting with, it is standard airline procedure that passengers on an aircraft are required to switch off their mobile phones. There's been arguments as to whether or not that does indeed interfere with the safety of the flight. I think I'll leave that to those who have technical expertise in the aviation sector. What has been widely established is the fact that this is standard practice not only in Nigeria but internationally, and that is so because there is that fear that if that is not done, there is a likelihood of signals from different phones jamming with the plane signal, which of course could imperil the flight. So, but as a matter of Nigeria's civil aviation regulations, passengers are required to comply with cabin crew instructions regarding the use of electronic devices while on board. So passengers are not allowed, to use their phones while the plane is taking off, and of course while the plane is landing. Of course, anyone who flies frequently, will be familiar with things like this. Non-compliance would always be considered to be a breach of the contract and aviation security rules. Don't forget that when a passenger purchases, an airline ticket, that immediately establishes a contract between the passenger and the airline company. Now that contract comes with certain terms and conditions. Of course, the passenger, upon purchasing the ticket and signing on in terms of maybe giving a signature and all that, the passenger has committed himself or herself to comply with the terms and the conditions. The passenger is not in a place, to pick and choose which of those terms and conditions to comply with. So one can safely say that Miss Comfort, having purchased, Ibom Air flight tickets and signing off to the terms and conditions, she had given her consent to be bound by those conditions all through the flight upon, when she finally evacuates the plane and she goes to a final destination. So point one is to establish the fact that Miss Comfort did breach aviation rules by refusing to switch off her phone. It is immaterial if, in a personal opinion, putting it on flight mode wouldn't imperil the plane. Like I just established and just stated, as long as the instruction is in line with the terms and conditions of the contract, which is of course the contract of service. She has paid for service to be flown from Uyo to Lagos, and the airline is rendering that service to her. She has a duty to comply with with the conditions, and failure to do so will be deemed to be a breach of aviation rules. So clearly, Ms. Comfort's refusal to comply with the flight attendant's instruction as well as the pilot's intervention, clearly constitutes a breach of a contract with Ibom here, and of course, our action, could be tantamount to violating aviation rules. Interestingly, the matter was resolved amicably, and one would imagine that it would have ended there, and that would have been it. However, like I stated, when I was relaying the facts, upon arrival in Lagos, Miss Comfort then did proceed to, apparently she already had the mind of getting her own pound of flesh from the flight attendant that maybe had embarrassed her by asking her to switch off her phone at the very beginning. So Upon arrival in Lagos, she proceeded to then assault the flight attendant. That is a clear case of assault under Nigeria's Criminal Code Act. The airline, of course, the flight attendants, the pilots, every of the airline staff on board, they exercise their powers based on the authority of the airline company. After landing, the pursuer, which is of course the flight attendants, restrained Comfort from disembarking immediately, citing safety and control due to her erratic behavior. This is legal and is in line with standard aviation practice. This is potentially a case of lawful limited restraint, which is a matter of safety. It is within the powers of airline companies to restrain passengers that they considered erratic. A number of persons have argued that restraining Miss Comfort on the airline and allowing her to disembark by herself was a violation of her right to freedom of movement. I disagree that that is the case. Of course, fundamental human rights are rights that every human beings have because they are humans and they are guaranteed by the law, particularly the Constitution. However, those rights are not absolute. Those rights are right to the extent that they do not violate the law or they do not encroach upon the rights of other people. Those rights can be limited so long as the limitation imposed on the right is in line with established or laid down rules which are backed by a law. Now, the point here is that Nigerian civil aviation regulations give powers to airline companies to exercise limited, restraining of erratic passengers. And so when they do that, they would not in breach of a passenger's right to freedom of movement. If that would be different, if Miss Comfort did not do anything and she was restrained, that of course would then amount to a violation of her right to freedom of movement. So Nigerian law permits reasonable restraint to prevent a passenger from causing harm either to himself or herself or to other passengers, or to prevent such a passenger from fleeing when such has been alleged of a dangerous conduct. For example, the airline company had already asked for airport security to come around to her to effect Miss Comfort's arrest. So the flight attendant restraining her was to restrain her such that her arrest could be effected, so which is in line with the law. It is similar to a citizen restraining another citizen because the police is about to effect that citizen's arrest. That will not constitute a violation of a citizen's freedom of movement because an arrest is already in motion, which of course is valid and in line with the law. So long as the restraint is limited and proportionate, this will not constitute or amount to a case of forced imprisonment, like a lot of people have argued that she was falsely imprisoned in the plane. That is not the case. So long as the restraint was limited and proportionate, that will not constitute a case of forced imprisonment. And like we all saw in the video, there was no way in which she was held down against her will. The flight attendant simply stood in the doorway to prevent her, which of course would constitute reasonable restraint. Nigerian civil aviation regulations demand that passengers comply with crew instructions at all times, and so crew may even ask the passenger to still remain in the airplane and not leave. That again will not constitute a case of forced imprisonment or a denial of the right to freedom of movement. From the airline's account, which of course it is in the place of the airline to corroborate, it was alleged that Miss Comfort not only assaulted the flight attendant, but she made an attempt to remove the aircraft fire extinguisher to continue with the assault. Again, that is a very serious criminal conduct. Clearly, from the videos that are even available in the public domain, Miss Comfort could even be seen, at least aside from the videos that we do not have access to of what happened before, but the ones that we have been able to see, Miss Comfort could be seen physically, assaulting the flight attendant, even slapping her, which of course, is in the public domain. Now, that's a clear case of assault and attempt to cause grievous bodily harm to another citizen, which is punishable under section 351 to 357 of Nigeria's Criminal Code Act. Now, this act is of course applicable, in Nigeria's southern region. So this is directly applicable to the matter that happened between Miss Comfort and Ibom Air. And I would imagine that it was on that basis that she was arraigned before the magistrates court in Lagos and thereafter remanded in Kirikiri prison. Her action, if true, of attempting to remove the aircraft fire extinguisher to hit another citizen itself constitutes, an attempt to cause damage to the aircraft, and that itself is a breach of civil aviation rules, and of course other security statutes that may also be relevant. Now let us move to Ms. Comfort's rights, because so far I've been able to establish the powers of the airline company as well as the rights of the airline company. So let us get to Ms. Comfort's rights, because the whole idea is to create a balance and not speak for either of the side. From the viral video, which has been a key part of the national discourse, the fact that in the course of dragging Ms. Comfort of the airplane, upper body parts, which is her bosom, was visibly exposed. The allegations that part of those who were trying to move her from the plane intentionally pulled off a blouse to shame her and to reveal body parts. That has not been established in any form or shape. But the point is that it is clear that her body part was exposed. It is important to state very clearly that notwithstanding Ms. Comfort's erratic behavior, disruptive and disorderly behavior, which we have established what the law prescribes and the powers of the airline company, in the course of her doing that, she retains a right to dignity of human person. And that right was of course violated in the course of evacuating her from the airline. It is not yet established as to whether a blouse was intentionally removed or not. If it is established that it was intentionally removed, that of course will mean that the perpetrator or whoever is responsible for that action becomes liable under the Nigerian Cybercrime Act, for indecent exposure and all of that, and the person will be accordingly dealt with. But under the Nigerian Constitution, every citizen has a fundamental human right to the dignity of the human person. So while airline and security operatives, can remove unruly passengers, can remove disruptive passengers, the stripping of Ms. Comfort and the exposure of her upper body parts, her bosom, raises serious concern and constitutes, a case of violation of a fundamental right to dignity of the human person. It also, could, be tantamount to degrading, inhumane punishment of a citizen. No human being, should be stripped or exposed in such a humiliating way. And at the end of all of her ordeal, Ms. Comfort may choose to pursue a case of breach of fundamental human rights against Ibom Air as she so chooses. So the point is that on her part, Ms. Comfort's right has also been violated, in the course of having evacuated from the airline. Not only can Ms. Comfort pursue, a case, of breach of violation of fundamental human rights, at the end of all of this, even the employees of the airline company can themselves be liable. Ibom Air and all the involved security personnel, as well as some of the flight attendants who were also involved, may have to face internal or external disciplinary measures, proceedings to determine whether or not their conduct was professional or whether it was unprofessional. If their conduct were found to have been unprofessional, then they'll be made to face, the music, particularly as a lot of Nigerians, have called out that aside all of what happened in the course of dragging her out of the aircraft, it is alleged that one of the people involved eventually was the one that released the video to the public space. And even the NCAA and the Minister of Aviation has also weighed in on that matter to say that whoever that employee is will be fished out and accordingly dealt with. So aside from Ms. Comfort pursuing a suit, and most likely she'll be entitled to damages for a breach of a fundamental human right to dignity of the human person, the employees could also still be sanctioned by their employer as well as the Nigerian Civil Aviation Agency. So having established Ms. Comfort's right in the course of evacuation, let us move to the last part, which is even after she was evacuated from the aircraft, Ms. Comfort continued with her disruptive behavior and remained very erratic, to the point that she continued to assault nearly everyone who tried to intervene, hitting people and all that. The point again is just like I've said in the earlier part of this video. Ms. Comfort continued assault on security staff even after removal from the aircraft compounds her criminal liability, and establishes a continuing case of assaults against not only one or two people but against several airport staff as well as law enforcement operatives. So I would imagine that it was on this basis, because if you take time and study the charge sheet upon which she was brought before the magistrate's court before her remand in Kirikiri, you will see that in the charge sheet most of the charges against her are charges of assault, not even related to whether or not she didn't switch off her phone and all that. Most of the charges were based on assault, and you will find in the charge sheet that the assault were assault against different people. So I take it that her disruptive behavior and a physical attack on different people considered the bulk of the reason why she is in so much trouble today. A number of persons have also argued concerning the life ban imposed on her by the airline operators of Nigeria, AON, as to the fact that the lifetime ban is illegal and unconstitutional. Obviously, the lifetime ban or the no-fly ban, if you want to call it that, is an administrative sanction, and this is within the powers of airline company. She's not been given a life ban not to fly or not to move around. She's been given a life ban by Ibom Air, so she can choose tomorrow to fly Air Peace, but she cannot fly Ibom Air. So that really is not a legal issue. It does not violate our rights in any way. There is basically no issue in that. It is as good as someone telling you not to come to their house. You cannot bring a case against them for so doing. It is within their rights to determine those who come into their house and those who do not come into their house. So that really does not raise any legal issue. So in closing, what the Comfort versus Ibom Air case as revealed or brought to the fore is that notorious issue concerning passengers' rights and the need for public safety on our national airlines. The fact is that while passengers have rights, and even before this incident happened, it's been a recurring decimal in Nigeria to have passengers be unruly, erratic, and disruptive during flights, and at the end of the day claiming to have rights that have been breached and being violated. It is important to state as I close in this video that even though passengers do have rights, like I have said, rights are not absolute. Rights are limited by laws, and that is so for a reason. That is so for a reason to ensure that public safety, public health, and public morality is safeguarded. Anytime when individual rights comes in conflict with public safety, with public health and public morality. Those three, public safety, public health, and public morality, would always trump individual rights. That was the reason why during COVID-19 pandemic, governments, were able to shut down, countries, even though people had right to freedom of movement and right to, do so many things. But those rights were limited. Why? Because there was a need to guarantee public safety because of an outbreak of a virus, to guarantee public health, and all those two key public measures, or if you may, those two key public goals, limited the rights of millions, if not billions of people across the entire world. So that is to establish, because again, it is the purpose of this video is also to educate people, and also let people know that even when this case dies down and everybody moves on, there's still a likelihood of similar things occurring. People should know that even though individuals have human rights, fundamental rights, those rights are limited when those rights come in conflict with matters of public safety, public health, and public morals. I do hope that today's video, has been instructive and has been enlightening. If you like the discussion that we have here and the analysis that we have here, please do subscribe, like the video, and please share. I will see you in my next video. Thank you very much.